Rain hammered Chicago the night the most feared mafia king in the Midwest married a woman who couldn't stop shaking. Caspian Vale owned half the city's underground, commanded armies, crushed empires. But on his wedding night, his bride whispered four words that shattered everything. Please don't touch me. Not nervous, terrified. And when her silk sleeves slipped, he saw bruises shaped like fingerprints covering her skin. Someone had been torturing his wife for years. That night, while champagne flowed and politicians celebrated the alliance that would end decades of bloodshed, Caspian made a silent vow. Whoever broke her would beg for death before he was finished. Want to see how far this story goes? Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I know where you're watching from. Now let's begin. The cathedral smelled like money and lies. Caspian Vale stood at the altar in a black suit tailored sharp enough to cut skin, watching his bride walk toward him through a sea of people who would kill each other the second this ceremony ended. Celine Arden moved like a ghost wrapped in ivory silk, her veil covering most of her face, her father's hand clamped around her arm like a shackle. 200 guests filled the pews, crime lords, politicians, federal judges on 6 different payrolls, Wall Street criminals in ties that cost more than most people's cars. This wasn't a wedding. This was a treaty signed in champagne and blood. Caspian had built his empire the old way. Violence, strategy, and the willingness to do what softer men refused to consider. At 34, he controlled the Midwest Syndicate, the most powerful organized crime network between New York and Los Angeles. His name alone made grown men check their rearview mirrors. But empires needed alliances. And Alaric Arden, the head of the East Coast dynasty, had offered his youngest daughter as the price for peace. Caspian had agreed without hesitation. Marriage meant nothing to him. It was paperwork, a merger. Another chess piece moved into position on a board soaked in decades of war. He expected a transaction. What he got was a woman who looked like she was walking toward her own execution. Celine reached the altar, and her father released her arm with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Up close, Caspian noticed details the distance had hidden. Her hands trembled against the bouquet of white roses. Her breathing came shallow and uneven. And when the officiant began speaking, she flinched at every word spoken too loudly. Caspian's jaw tightened. He had done his research. Celine Arden, 26 years old, educated at private schools in Europe, fluent in 4 languages, trained in classical piano. No scandals, no public relationships. The perfect daughter from a perfect bloodline. The file said nothing about fear. The ceremony blurred past in a haze of Latin phrases and orchestral music. Rings exchanged, vows recited, a kiss so brief it barely counted as contact. Celine's lips were cold against his, and when he pulled back, her eyes stayed closed like she was praying for it to be over. The reception exploded into controlled chaos. Champagne towers, a 12-piece orchestra, speeches delivered by men who smiled while mentally calculating how to betray each other. Caspian played his role perfectly, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, pretending this was anything other than a business arrangement sealed with a marriage license. Celine sat beside him at the head table, silent and still, touching nothing on her plate. "You should eat," Caspian said quietly. She flinched at his voice. "I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten all night." "I said I'm not hungry." Her tone carried an edge he hadn't expected. Not defiance exactly, something closer to exhaustion. Caspian studied her profile. The makeup was flawless, but it couldn't completely hide the shadows beneath her eyes or the tension in her jaw. She looked like someone who had stopped sleeping years ago. Across the ballroom, Alaric Arden raised a glass toward them, grinning like a man who had just closed the deal of a lifetime. Beside him sat a tall, sharp-featured man in his late 30s, impeccably dressed, his smile polite and empty. Lucien Thorne. Caspian recognized him from the files, heir to one of New York's oldest crime families, engaged to Celine's older sister, Victoria, a man whose reputation was spotless in a world built on blood and dirt. Lucien's gaze lingered on Celine for a moment too long, and Celine's entire body went rigid. Caspian filed that reaction away without comment. The reception dragged on for hours. Speeches, toasts, a first dance where Celine moved through the steps like a programmed machine, never meeting his eyes, never relaxing even when the music softened. Caspian could feel her pulse hammering through the thin fabric of her gown, every time his hand rested against her back. Finally, near midnight, the crowd began to thin. Caspian's security chief, a scarred bulldog of a man named Rourke, appeared at his elbow. "Car's ready, boss." Caspian nodded. He turned to Celine. "Time to go." She stood immediately, like she had been waiting for permission. The ride to the penthouse was silent. Celine stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing shallow. Caspian watched her from the corner of his eye, trying to reconcile the terrified woman beside him with the carefully constructed fiction of a political alliance. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. Caspian had purchased it 2 years ago, not because he needed the space, but because he liked knowing he owned the highest point in the skyline. They stepped into the private elevator. The doors closed. Celine's reflection stared back at her from the polished steel, pale and hollow. "Are you going to tell me what's wrong?" Caspian asked. "Nothing's wrong. You've been shaking since the ceremony." "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." Celine's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth would be a start." She laughed once, sharp and bitter. "The truth? You want the truth?" She turned to face him fully for the first time all night. "The truth is that I'm a chess piece traded by my father to secure an alliance. The truth is that I don't know you. The truth is that I'm standing in an elevator with a man who kills people for a living, and in about 3 minutes we're going to walk into a bedroom where you'll expect me to—" Her voice cracked. She stopped, looked away. The elevator doors opened. Caspian stepped out first. The penthouse spread before them in cold, minimalist elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, black leather furniture, abstract art that cost more than most houses. It looked like a magazine spread. Sterile, unwelcoming. Celine hesitated in the elevator doorway. "You can come in," Caspian said flatly. "I'm not going to drag you." She stepped out slowly, still clutching the edges of her gown like armor. Caspian crossed to the bar and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He drank half of it in one swallow, letting the burn settle his temper. When he turned back, Celine stood frozen near the entrance, staring at the bedroom doors like they led to a guillotine. "Look," Caspian said, keeping his voice even. "I don't know what you think is about to happen here. I know exactly what's about to happen here." Her voice came out flat. "Dead." Caspian set the glass down hard enough to crack it. "Then you're wrong." Celine blinked. "What?" "I said you're wrong." He crossed his arms. "I didn't marry you because I wanted a wife. I married you because your father offered an alliance I couldn't refuse. That's it. That's the entire transaction. You sleep in the bedroom. I'll take the guest room. We show up together at public events, smile for photographs, and pretend this marriage means something. Beyond that?" He shrugged. "We don't have to like each other. We don't even have to talk." Celine stared at him like he had just spoken a foreign language. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What's not to understand?" "You're saying you don't want—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "What I want," Caspian said slowly, "is for you to stop looking at me like I'm about to hurt you." Something flickered across her face. Not relief. Something rawer. For a moment he thought she might cry. Instead, she turned toward the bedroom without another word. Caspian let her go. He poured another whiskey and stood at the windows, watching rain streak down glass 60 floors above the city. Below, Chicago glittered like broken glass scattered across velvet. His city, his kingdom, his empire built on violence and strategy and the willingness to be colder than everyone else. But standing in that sterile penthouse, watching his bride disappear into a bedroom like she was walking into a cage, Caspian felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Doubt. He drained the glass and headed for the guest room. Book. The scream woke him at 3 a.m. Caspian was on his feet before his brain fully processed the sound. Instinct taking over. He grabbed the handgun from the nightstand and moved through the dark penthouse in bare feet, every nerve firing. The bedroom door was closed. Another scream tore through the silence. Raw. Animal. Terrified. Caspian kicked the door open. Celine thrashed in the bed, tangled in sheets, fighting invisible hands. Her eyes were wide but unseeing, locked in some nightmare that hadn't released her even though she was technically awake. Tears streaked her face, her hands clawed at nothing. "No, please, I'll be good. Please don't." Caspian set the gun down and approached slowly, the way you would approach a wounded animal. Celine. She didn't hear him. Celine. Louder this time. Her fist swung wild. Caspian caught it gently, then caught the other one when she tried again. He pinned her wrist carefully against the mattress, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop the flailing. Celine, wake up. You're safe. Wake up. Her eyes focused slowly. The thrashing stopped. Recognition dawned. Then came the sobbing, deep, broken, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Caspian released her wrists and stepped back, giving her space. Celine curled into herself, arms wrapped tight around her ribs, crying like someone who had been holding it in for years. He should have left, given her privacy, let her put herself back together without an audience. But something about the way she folded in on herself, like she was trying to disappear into the mattress, kept him frozen in place. "I'm sorry," she choked out between sobs. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. I can't help it. Celine." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Stop apologizing." She pressed her face into her knees and cried harder. Caspian dragged a hand through his hair, frustrated by his own uselessness. He had commanded armies, orchestrated assassinations, negotiated treaties with men who would kill their own mothers for power. But standing in this bedroom watching his wife break apart in front of him, he had no idea what to do. Finally, the crying slowed. Celine lifted her head, wiping tears with shaking hands. Her hair had come loose from its pins, falling around her face in dark waves. The expensive makeup was ruined, and her nightgown had twisted during the struggle. The thin silk strap slipped off her shoulder, exposing skin Caspian hadn't seen before. Bruises. Dark purple and fading yellow, shaped like fingerprints. 4 on her shoulder. A thumbprint near her collarbone. Caspian's blood went cold. Celine noticed where he was looking. Panic flashed across her face. She yanked the strap back up, pulling the fabric tight, trying to hide what he had already seen. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "I bruise easily." "Don't. It's just, don't lie to me." Caspian's voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. "How long?" "It doesn't matter long. How long?" Celine's throat worked. 5 years. The room tilted. Caspian had built his empire on calculated violence. He understood brutality as a tool. But this was different. This was deliberate, sustained, hidden beneath silk gowns and perfect smiles. "Who?" The word came out flat. Celine shook her head violently. "I can't. Tell me his name. He'll kill someone if I talk. I don't care who he threatens. Tell me his name." Celine looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "You don't understand. He's not just anyone. He's connected, protected. If I say anything, people will die." "Celine." Caspian crouched down so they were eye level. "I am the most dangerous man in this city. Whatever protection he has, I promise you, it won't be enough. Tell me his name." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Trust, maybe. Or just the absence of lies. Finally, she whispered, "Lucien Thorne." Everything stopped. Lucien Thorne, the man sitting beside Alaric Arden at the reception, the heir to one of New York's most powerful families, engaged to Celine's older sister, one of the most respected men in their world. "He's been hurting you for 5 years, Caspian said slowly, needing to hear it confirmed. Celine nodded. "And your father knows." Another nod. "Tell me everything." So she did. The words came haltingly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. She told him about the first time Lucien hit her, a backhand across the face when she was 21, followed by an apology and roses the next day. She told him how it escalated. Bruises hidden by long sleeves. Broken ribs explained away as riding accidents. Nights locked in rooms with no food, no water, no mercy. She told him how her father had arranged it. "He wanted me trained," Celine said, her voice hollow. "That's the word he used, trained, like I was a dog that needed to learn obedience before I could be married off. Lucien was supposed to teach me how to be a proper wife, quiet, submissive, grateful." Caspian's hands curled into fists. "There's a girl," Celine continued. "Elena, she's 12. daughter of one of the household staff. Lucien told me if I ever spoke about what he did, he would kill her, not quickly. He described exactly how he would do it, every detail. Her voice cracked. So I stayed quiet. I survived. And I prayed someone would save me or kill me. I didn't care which. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an execution. Caspian stood slowly, walked to the windows, stared out at the city below. Behind him, Celine's breathing came quick and shallow, waiting for his response. When Caspian finally spoke, his voice carried no emotion at all. Get dressed. We're leaving. What? Where? Somewhere safe. He turned to face her. I need to make some calls, and you need to stay out of sight until I figure out how to handle this. You can't do anything, Celine said desperately. He's too powerful. My father will protect him. The families will protect him. If you go after Lucien, you'll start a war. Then we'll start a war. You don't understand. No. Caspian crossed back to her. You don't understand. 5 years ago, Lucien Thorne made the worst mistake of his miserable life. He hurt someone who now belongs to me. That makes this personal. And when I take things personally, he smiled, cold and sharp. People disappear. Celine stared at him, something like hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since he met her. Why would you do this? She whispered. You don't even know me. Caspian considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. The simple answer was easier. Because, he said quietly, no one gets to break you except yourself. He left the room before she could respond. Trumpet. By sunrise, Caspian had made 17 phone calls. The first was to Rourke, his security chief. I need a safe house. Off the books. No one knows about it except you and me. The second was to Marcus Chen, his financial investigator. Lucien Thorne, I want everything. Bank records, property holdings, shell corporations, every dirty secret he's ever tried to hide. I want it yesterday. The third was to a federal contact who owed him 3 favors. I need surveillance, phones, emails, security footage, everything connected to Lucien Thorne for the past 5 years. By the time Celine emerged from the bedroom, dressed in jeans and a sweater that covered every inch of skin, Caspian had mobilized his entire network. She found him in the kitchen, surrounded by paperwork and burner phones, his face carved from stone. Coffee? He offered. Celine nodded slowly. He poured her a cup. Black. She wrapped both hands around it like she needed the warmth more than the caffeine. I meant what I said last night, Caspian told her. This doesn't end until Lucien pays for what he did to you. He'll fight back. Let him. People will die. People die every day. He leaned against the counter. The question is whether you want to spend the rest of your life afraid or whether you want to watch the man who tortured you burn. Celine stared into her coffee. I don't know how to not be afraid anymore. Then I'll teach you. She looked up sharply. Caspian met her gaze without flinching. You spent 5 years being trained to be a victim. Starting today, I'm going to train you to be something else. What? Dangerous. Something shifted in Celine's expression. Not quite belief, but maybe the beginning of it. Before she could respond, Caspian's phone buzzed. He checked the message and swore under his breath. What is it? Celine asked. Caspian's jaw tightened. Your father just called a summit. Every major family head from New York to Chicago. 3 days from now. Why? To celebrate our marriage. He smiled without humor. And to formally announce the alliance between our families. Celine went pale. Lucien will be there. I know. He'll expect me to... She couldn't finish. I know. Caspian set down his phone. Which is why we have 3 days to prepare. 3 days to gather evidence. 3 days to build a case so airtight that even the most loyal families won't be able to protect him. And if we can't? Caspian's smile turned cold. Then I'll kill him myself and deal with the consequences after. Celine studied him for a long moment. You really mean that? Every word. She set down her coffee cup. Her hand still trembled, but her voice came out steady. Then teach me. Whatever you think I need to know. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of running. I want to fight back. Caspian extended his hand. Celine looked at it. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Her grip was weak, uncertain, but it was a beginning. First lesson, Caspian said. Stop apologizing for taking up space. You're not a guest in your own life anymore. You're a weapon, and weapons don't apologize. Celine's eyes welled up, but this time she didn't cry. She nodded once, and somewhere in the cold morning light filtering through bulletproof glass, the terrified bride who whispered, "Please don't touch me," began to disappear. What emerged in her place would take time to fully form, but Caspian could already see the outline of something fierce taking shape. Outside, Chicago woke to another ordinary day. Politicians climbed into limousines. Businessmen sipped espresso in corner offices. The city moved through its routines like nothing had changed, but 60 floors above the streets, in a penthouse that smelled like whiskey and secrets, a war began. Not with bullets, not yet. With a handshake between a man who built empires on violence and a woman who survived 5 years of hell without breaking. And in 3 days, when they walked into that summit together, Lucienne Thorne would finally learn what happened when predators underestimated their prey. The basement shooting range smelled like gunpowder and concrete. Caspian stood behind Celine, watching her hand shake as she tried to grip the Glock 19 he'd placed in her palms 30 seconds ago. Her fingers kept slipping off the textured grip. Sweat beaded on her temple despite the underground chill. "I can't do this," she whispered. "You can. My hands won't stop shaking." "Good. Fear keeps you alive. Now raise the weapon." Celine lifted the gun with both hands. The barrel wobbled like a compass needle searching for north. 15 feet downrange, a paper target hung motionless, its silhouette almost mocking in its stillness. "Breathe," Caspian said quietly. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." She tried, failed. Her breathing came in shallow gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with panic. "I'm going to touch your shoulder," Caspian warned. "Tell me if you need me to stop." Celine nodded once. He placed his hand gently on her right shoulder blade. She flinched but didn't pull away. Progress. 2 days ago, any touch from behind would have sent her into a full spiral. "Your stance is wrong," Caspian said. "Right foot back, shoulder width apart. Lean into it like you're pushing against a door." She adjusted. Still shaking, but the wobble decreased. "Now find the front sight, that little dot at the end of the barrel. Ignore everything else. The target's just a shape. Focus on the sight." Celine squinted down the barrel. "When you're ready," Caspian continued, "squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. Don't jerk. Squeeze like you're trying to crush a grape without breaking it." 5 seconds passed. 10. The gunshot cracked through the basement like thunder in a tin can. The bullet punched into the concrete wall 3 feet left of the target. Celine lowered the gun immediately, her face flushing. "I missed." "You fired. That's what matters." "I missed by a mile." "You've been holding a gun for 3 minutes. I've been shooting since I was 12. Try again." She raised the weapon. This time her hands shook less. The second shot hit the edge of the target. The third grazed the outer ring. By the 10th shot, she put one in the silhouette's shoulder. Caspian stepped back. "Reload." Celine fumbled one of the magazine, dropping it twice before sliding it home with a click that echoed in the confined space. "Again!" She fired, reloaded, fired, reloaded. An hour passed. When the session ended, Celine's hands were covered in blisters from gripping too hard. Her shirt was soaked through with sweat. She looked like she'd run a marathon, but she'd put 6 rounds center mass. "Better," Caspian said, taking the weapon and clearing it. "Tomorrow, we do it in the dark." Celine stared at him. "What?" "Lucian won't attack you in broad daylight on a well-lit range. You need to learn how to fight when you can't see what's coming." "I don't think I can." "You will." He set the gun down. "Because in 2 days we're walking into a room with him, and I need you to be able to stand there without falling apart." Celine's jaw tightened. "I won't fall apart." "Prove it. Upstairs. Now." Shot. The penthouse had been transformed into something between a war room and a fortress. Marcus Chen, Caspian's financial investigator, had taken over the dining room table. Laptops, external drives, and printed spreadsheets covered every surface. The man himself looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. Wire-rimmed glasses askew, coffee-stained shirt. The manic energy of someone who'd discovered something terrible. "Tell me you found something," Caspian said, crossing the room. Marcus looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Found something? Boss, I found everything. He spun a laptop around. On the screen, bank statements, shell corporations, wire transfers moving through 3 countries and a dozen fake companies before landing in accounts registered to names that didn't exist. Lucien Thorne is clean on paper, Marcus began. Perfect credit, legitimate investments, real estate holdings in Manhattan, Miami, and the Hamptons. The IRS loves him. The SEC loves him. On the surface, he's a model citizen. And underneath? Marcus's smile turned grim. Underneath, he's running one of the most sophisticated trafficking networks on the East Coast. The words landed like a physical blow. Celine, who had been pouring water in the kitchen, dropped the glass. It shattered on the tile floor. Caspian turned. Celine! He's trafficking people. Her voice came out strangled. Marcus glanced at Caspian, uncertain whether to continue. Tell her, Caspian said flatly. Marcus pulled up another file. We tracked payments going to a logistics company called Meridian Transport. On paper, they move freight containers. In reality, they're moving women. Young women, mostly from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. They arrive at ports in Miami and New York, get processed through fake employment agencies, and end up in private clubs. Clubs, Celine repeated. High-end, invitation only. Clients include politicians, CEOs, and… Marcus hesitated. And what? Caspian demanded. Law enforcement. Federal agents, judges, people who are supposed to stop this kind of thing are paying for access. Caspian's hands curled into fists on the table. How many? How many women or how many clients? Both. Marcus scrolled through pages of data. Best estimate? Over 200 women in the past 3 years. Clients? At least 50 confirmed, but the network's bigger than what we can see. Lucien's careful. Everything's compartmentalized. He doesn't touch the operations directly. He just collects money and provides protection through his family's connections. Celine made a sound halfway between a sob and a scream. She pressed her hands over her mouth, backing away from the table, like the information was physically attacking her. Caspian moved toward her. Celine, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. She disappeared into the bedroom. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Marcus winced. Should I… Keep digging, Caspian said coldly. I want names, dates, locations, every piece of evidence we can use to bury him. What are you going to do with it? Depends on how the summit goes. Marcus pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Boss, if you go public with this, you're not just exposing Lucien. You're exposing everyone connected to him. That includes federal agents, sitting judges, 2 congressmen, and… He paused. And Alaric Arden. Caspian went still. Celine's father is involved? Not directly, but he's taken payments from Lucien's shell companies. Consulting fees, campaign donations. Enough money that if this goes public, he goes down too. How much? North of 15 million over 4 years. Caspian stared at the spreadsheets without really seeing them. The implications cascaded like falling dominoes. If he exposed Lucien, he exposed Alaric. If he exposed Alaric, the East Coast Alliance collapsed. If the alliance collapsed, the treaty that ended 30 years of bloodshed died with it. War would follow. Not the quiet kind fought in back rooms and legal offices. The loud kind. Bodies in streets. Retaliation. Escalation. Keep digging, Caspian repeated. And Marcus? No one else sees this. Not Rourke. Not your team. Just you and me. Marcus nodded slowly and turned back to his laptops. Caspian walked to the bedroom door, knocked once. Celine. Silence. I'm coming in. He opened the door. Celine sat on the floor against the far wall, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Tears streaked her face, but she wasn't crying anymore. She looked hollowed out, empty. Caspian sat down on the floor across from her, keeping distance between them. I didn't know, Celine whispered. I knew he hurt me. I knew he was cruel, but I didn't know he was doing that to other women. It's not your fault. Isn't it? She looked at him with eyes full of something worse than grief, guilt. I survived. I stayed quiet. I let him keep hurting me because I was too afraid to fight back. How many women ended up in those clubs because I didn't say anything? Celine. How many? Her voice cracked. 10? 20? 100? Caspian leaned forward. Listen to me. You were a victim. You were isolated, threatened, and controlled by someone who knew exactly how to break you. Nothing that happened to those women is your responsibility. Then whose is it? Lucien's, your father's. Every man who knew and did nothing. He held her gaze. And mine, if I don't stop it now. Celine wiped her face with shaking hands. What are we going to do? We're going to the summit. We're going to stand in front of every family head in the region, and we're going to expose everything. They'll kill us. Maybe. My father will deny it. Probably. Lucien's family will protect him. They'll try. Celine's laugh came out broken. So we're just going to walk into a room full of killers and hope they decide to do the right thing? No, Caspian said. We're going to force them to choose between profit and principles. Most of them will choose profit, but not all of them. And the ones who choose principles? He smiled coldly. Those are the ones who'll help us burn Lucien alive. You're insane. Probably. This is going to start a war. I know. Celine stared at him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? You could just kill him quietly, make it look like an accident. No one would question it. Because killing him quietly doesn't save the women he's trafficking. It doesn't stop the network. It just puts someone else in charge. So this is about justice. This is about making sure predators understand that there are still lines that can't be crossed. He stood and offered his hand. Come on, we have work to do. Celine looked at his hand like it was a lifeline thrown into deep water. Then she took it. The next 36 hours blurred together in a haze of preparation. Rourke drilled Celine on security protocols, how to identify exits, how to move through crowds without being isolated, how to recognize threats before they materialized. Marcus continued building the case, assembling evidence into a presentation that could be delivered in under 10 minutes to a room full of people with the attention span of rabid wolves. And Caspian made calls. Some went to allies, old friends who owed favors, lieutenants who had sworn loyalty with blood oaths years ago. Others went to enemies. That was the interesting part. You're inviting Vincent Marcello? Rourke asked, incredulous, when he saw the guest list. Vincent Marcello ran the Philadelphia Syndicate. He and Caspian had nearly killed each other 3 years ago over a territory dispute that ended with 17 dead and a truce signed in a hospital room, while both men bled from gunshot wounds. I'm inviting everyone who hates Lucien Thorne, Caspian replied. Turns out that's more people than I expected. Marcello will use this to make a play against you. Let him try. The night before the summit, Celine couldn't sleep. Caspian found her in the living room at 2 a.m, standing at the windows, staring out at the city below. You should rest, he said quietly. Can't. Nightmares? No, just thinking. Caspian joined her at the window. Below, Chicago sprawled in every direction, a grid of lights and shadows that never truly slept. What happens if this doesn't work? Celine asked. Then we fight. And if we lose, we won't. She turned to look at him. How can you be so sure? Because I've never lost a fight that mattered. He met her gaze. And you matter. Celine's breath caught. Why? Why do you matter? Yes. Caspian considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. The simple answer was harder to explain. Because someone has to, he said finally. And right now, that someone is me. Celine studied his face for a long moment. Then, without warning, she leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't passionate, wasn't desperate. Just a brief press of lips against lips that lasted maybe 3 seconds before she pulled back. Thank you, she whispered. Then she walked back to the bedroom, leaving Caspian standing alone at the window, still tasting her on his lips. The summit was held in a neutral location, a private estate in the suburbs owned by the Benedetti family, one of the oldest criminal organizations in the Midwest. The house looked like something from a period drama. Stone walls, manicured gardens, security gates disguised as decorative iron fencing. Inside, crystal chandeliers hung above marble floors polished to a mirror shine. 37 family heads and their primary advisors filled the main ballroom. Caspian arrived with Celine on his arm, flanked by Rourke and 4 additional security personnel, who looked like they could break concrete with their bare hands. Every eye in the room turned toward them. The murmurs started immediately. Celine wore a navy blue dress that covered her from neck to wrist, conservative enough to pass scrutiny, but tailored well enough to command respect. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. No jewelry except her wedding ring. She looked like armor wrapped in fabric. "Stay close," Caspian murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." They moved through the room toward their assigned seats at the head table. Alaric Arden stood near the bar, holding court with 3 other family heads, laughing at something one of them said. He saw them approaching. The laughter died. "Caspian," Alaric said smoothly, extending his hand. "Good to see you." Caspian shook it without enthusiasm. "Alaric." Alaric's gaze shifted to Celine. "Daughter, you look well." "Do I?" Celine's voice came out flat. Something flickered across Alaric's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition that his youngest daughter had changed in the 5 days since he'd traded her away. "We should talk," Alaric said quietly. "Privately." "No need," Caspian replied. "Anything you want to say can be said here." "I don't think I wasn't asking." Tension crackled between them like static electricity before a lightning strike. Rourke shifted his weight, one hand drifting toward his concealed weapon. Then a voice cut through the standoff like a knife through silk. "Caspian Vale, still making friends wherever you go." Lucian Thorne. He approached from the other side of the ballroom, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His smile was warm, friendly, the kind of smile that belonged on magazine covers and political campaigns. Beside Caspian, Celine went rigid. Her breathing changed, shallow, quick, the kind of panic response that came from years of conditioning. Lucian's gaze slid to her. "Celine, you look radiant." She didn't respond. "Marriage suits you," Lucian continued, stepping closer. "Though I'm surprised you're here. These events can be so overwhelming." Caspian shifted slightly, placing himself between Lucian and Celine without making it obvious. "She's exactly where she needs to be," Caspian said coldly. Lucian's smile never wavered. "Of course! I meant no offense." He glanced at Alaric. "I was just telling your father how pleased everyone is with this alliance, the stability it brings, the opportunities for cooperation." "Cooperation," Caspian repeated. "Interesting choice of words." "Is it?" "Considering your business ventures." Lucian's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "I have many business ventures. You'll have to be more specific." "I will be, in about 10 minutes. The ballroom seemed to still. Alaric frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see." Caspian turned to Celine. "Ready?" She nodded once. They walked toward the head table, leaving Alaric and Lucian staring after them. The presentation began at precisely 8 o'clock. Antonio Benedetti, the host, called the room to order with a sharp whistle that cut through the ambient conversation like a blade. "Gentlemen," he announced, "and ladies, we're here tonight to formally recognize the marriage between Caspian Vale and Celine Arden and to celebrate the alliance that ends 30 years of territorial conflict between the Midwest Syndicate and the East Coast families." Polite applause. "However," Antonio continued, glancing at Caspian, "it seems Mr. Vale has requested time to address this assembly before we proceed with formalities." "Caspian?" Caspian stood. The room went silent. He crossed to the front of the ballroom where a projection screen had been set up. Marcus, hidden in a back room, already had the presentation loaded. "I appreciate everyone coming tonight," Caspian began. His voice carried easily across the space. Calm, controlled, lethal. "I know some of you traveled a long way. I'll try to make this worth your time." A few chuckles. "Most of you know me by reputation. Some of you know me personally. You know I don't waste words, so I'll be direct." He clicked the remote. The first image appeared on the screen, a photograph of Lucian Thorne at a charity gala, smiling beside a senator. "Lucian Thorne," Caspian said, "heir to one of New York's most respected families, engaged to Victoria Arden, business partner to several people in this room." More murmurs. Click. The next image showed a shipping manifest. "This is Meridian Transport, a logistics company registered in Delaware, owned through a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. On paper, they move freight containers between Miami and New York." Click. Financial records. In reality, they're moving people. Women, girls, some as young as 15. The murmurs grew louder. Click. Photographs of women, faces blurred for privacy, but the fear in their eyes unmistakable even through pixelation. These women were trafficked through Meridian Transport over the past 3 years. They were promised jobs, education, a better life. Instead, they ended up in private clubs where men paid for access. Someone in the back of the room swore. Click. A list of names. Client list. Half the room recognized at least one name. Some recognized several. 2 congressmen, Caspian continued. 4 federal agents, 7 judges, and at least 30 businessmen whose companies you probably invest in. Click. Wire transfers. All payments traced back to accounts controlled by Lucien and Thorne. The room exploded. Voices overlapped. Accusations flew. Someone threw a glass that shattered against the wall. Caspian waited for the chaos to die down before continuing. I know what some of you are thinking. This is convenient timing. Caspian Vale marries into the Arden family and immediately tries to destroy their allies. Must be a power play. He clicked again. Medical records appeared, hospital admissions, x-rays showing fractures. These belong to my wife. The room went dead silent. 5 years of abuse, documented injuries explained away as accidents, riding falls, stairs, clumsiness. Caspian's voice dropped to something colder than ice. All inflicted by Lucien Thorne. Every head in the room turned toward Lucien. He stood near the bar, his face carved from stone, showing nothing. That's a lie, Lucien said calmly. Is it? Caspian clicked again. Security footage? Grainy but clear enough. A hallway in what looked like a mansion, Lucien dragging Celine by her hair into a room, the door slamming. The timestamp read 3 years ago. I have 17 more videos like this, Caspian said. Surveillance from the Arden estate. Security systems that were supposed to protect her. He looked directly at Alaric. Systems monitored by her own father. Alaric's face went white. You son of a bitch, someone hissed from the crowd. Caspian clicked one final time. The screen filled with a list. Names, dates, locations, a complete breakdown of Lucien's trafficking network. Everyone in this room makes money through violence, Caspian said quietly. We run drugs, guns, gambling, protection rackets. We're not saints, but there are lines, rules that keep us from becoming the monsters the world already thinks we are. He turned to face the assembly fully. Lucien Thorne crossed every single one of those lines. He's a predator, a trafficker, a man who built wealth on the suffering of women who couldn't fight back. Caspian's voice hardened. And everyone who knew and did nothing is just as guilty. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an avalanche. Then Vincent Marcello stood. The Philadelphia boss, the man who once tried to kill Caspian over territory, looked around the room with disgust written across his scarred face. Vale's right, Vincent said flatly. We're criminals, but we're not this. Anyone who protects this piece of shit can get the fuck out of my city. Another voice joined him, then another. Within seconds, half the room was standing. The other half stayed seated, their faces carefully neutral, calculating the political cost of every choice. Alaric Arden remained seated. Lucien's smile finally cracked. This is a setup, Lucien snarled. Vale fabricated everything. Did I fabricate the bruises on my wife? Caspian's voice cut through the room like a whip crack. Did I fabricate 5 years of terror? Did I fabricate 200 women stolen from their lives? You don't have any real proof. I have 15 federal agents waiting outside with warrants. The words landed like a bomb. Lucien's face went from confident to something closer to panic in the space between heartbeats. You're bluffing. Am I? Caspian pulled out his phone, dialed a number, put it on speaker. Agent Morrison? A voice answered. It's time, Caspian said simply. Copy that. Moving in. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, the ballroom doors burst open. Federal agents in tactical gear poured into the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Lucien Thorne, you're under arrest for human trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and about 40 other charges I'll read to you in the car. Lucien ran. He made it maybe 10 feet before Rourke clotheslined him with an arm that looked like it could stop a truck. Lucian hit the marble floor hard enough to crack something. The agent swarmed him. Zip ties. Miranda Wright shouted over the chaos, blood from a split lip spreading across polished white marble. And through it all, Celine stood at the head table, watching the man who tortured her for 5 years get dragged away in handcuffs. She didn't cry, didn't smile, didn't show anything except the cold satisfaction of watching a monster finally face consequences. Alaric Arden tried to leave during the chaos. Caspian caught him at the door. "Where do you think you're going?" "This isn't over," Alaric hissed. "You're right. It's not." Caspian leaned in close. "You sold your daughter to a predator. You took money from a trafficking operation. You let him torture her for 5 years. His voice dropped to a whisper only Alaric could hear. "The only reason you're not in handcuffs right now is because I promised Celine I'd let her decide your fate. But trust me, if she gives the word, you'll disappear so completely, even the rats won't find your bones." He stepped back. Alaric looked past him toward Celine, standing alone near the window, watching the federal vehicles leave with their prize. For just a moment, something like shame crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a man already planning his next move. "This war you just started," Alaric said quietly, "it's going to cost you everything." "Then I guess we'll find out what everything means." Alaric walked out into the night. Caspian returned to Celine. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since the agents arrived. "It's done," he said quietly. "Is it?" Her voice sounded distant, hollow. "Lucien's arrested. The network's exposed. Federal task force is already moving on the clubs. And the women? Safe houses. Witness protection for the ones willing to testify. Medical care, legal support." He paused. "We can't undo what happened to them, but we can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." Celine finally turned to look at him. "My father knew the whole time. He knew what Lucien was doing to me, and he let it happen. I know. He sold me, like I was property. I know. And now he's just walking away?" Caspian saw something dangerous flickering behind her eyes. Not fear this time, something colder, fury. "What do you want me to do?" he asked carefully. Celine stared out at the night for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight it hadn't held before. "I want him to lose everything, his territory, his respect, his power, every single thing he values." She looked at Caspian. "And I want him to know it was me." Caspian smiled slowly. "That can be arranged." Outside, sirens wailed through the suburban darkness as federal vehicles disappeared toward the city. Behind them, the ballroom emptied in tense silence. Some families left together. Others walked out alone, already planning their next moves in a game that had just been rewritten by a woman who refused to stay broken. And in the chaos of shattered alliances and burned bridges, no one noticed the quiet transformation that had occurred. The terrified bride who whispered, "Please don't touch me," was gone. In her place stood someone who had looked at the man who tortured her and watched him dragged away in chains without flinching. Someone who was ready to burn down everything her father built. Someone dangerous. The war Caspian promised had begun not with bullets, but with evidence and exposure. But wars don't stay civilized for long. And somewhere in the darkness between what was said and what was coming, both Caspian and Celine understood the same truth. They had crossed the point of no return. There would be blood before this ended. The only question was whose. The call came at 4 in the morning, 6 days after Lucien's arrest. Caspian's phone vibrated against the nightstand with the specific pattern he'd assigned to emergencies only. He was awake before the second buzz, instinct overriding exhaustion. "What?" Rourke's voice came through tight and controlled. "We have a problem. Big one. Talk." "Lucien's out." Caspian sat up, fully alert. "That's impossible. Federal custody, no bail, 24-hour surveillance." "Yeah, well, someone made the impossible happen. He walked out of Metropolitan Correctional 2 hours ago. Clean paperwork, judge's signature, the whole thing official." "Which judge?" "That's the problem, Judge Hendricks." Caspian's blood went cold. Hendricks was on the client list. One of the names Marcus had flagged as being on Lucien's payroll for years. "Where is he now?" "Is unknown." We lost him after he left the building. No phone signal, no car registered in his name moving through the city. He's ghost. Caspian was already moving, pulling on clothes with one hand while holding the phone with the other. Get everyone to the safe house. Full lockdown protocol. I want eyes on every entrance and triple security on Celine. Boss, there's more. Something in Rourke's tone made Caspian pause. What? Marcus is dead. The words didn't register at first. Couldn't register. Marcus Chen, the financial investigator who'd spent 72 hours building an airtight case against one of the most dangerous men in organized crime, was supposed to be in protective custody. How? Car accident. 3 hours ago on the Kennedy Expressway. Vehicle went off the overpass at 80 miles an hour, burned on impact. Witnesses? None. Traffic cameras were offline for maintenance, convenient timing. Caspian's grip on his phone tightened until the case cracked. What about the evidence? The files? Silence. Rourke. What about the files? Marcus kept everything on encrypted drives. We had backups at 3 locations. All 3 were hit tonight, simultaneously. Professional jobs. They knew exactly where to look. The federal copies? Also gone. Someone walked into the evidence room at the FBI field office with proper credentials and removed every piece of physical evidence connected to the Thorne case. Digital files were wiped from their servers. Caspian stood frozen in the dark bedroom, his mind racing through implications that spiraled into nightmare territory. Lucien was free. The evidence was gone. The man who built the case was dead. It gets worse, Rourke continued quietly. How could it possibly get worse? Agent Morrison, the Fed who arrested Lucien, found in his apartment an hour ago, single gunshot. They're calling it suicide. The phone slipped from Caspian's hand, not from shock, from the sudden understanding that they hadn't been fighting one man. They'd been fighting an entire system. Celine woke to the sound of car doors slamming outside. She sat up in the safe house bedroom, heart already racing before her brain caught up to identify the threat. Through the window, she could see black SUVs forming a perimeter, armed men moving with military precision, Caspian's men, which meant something was wrong. She was dressed and out of the room in 30 seconds. Caspian stood in the main living area, surrounded by Rourke and 6 other security personnel. His face looked carved from granite, all the warmth drained out and replaced with something colder than winter. What happened? Celine asked. Caspian turned. For just a moment, she saw something crack in his expression. Not fear exactly. Something closer to fury mixed with calculation. Lucien's out, he said flatly. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not possible. It happened anyway. But the evidence, gone. All of it. Celine's legs went weak. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Marcus? Dead, along with Agent Morrison and probably anyone else who touched this case. How? Her voice cracked. How is this possible? Caspian crossed to the windows, staring out at the safe house perimeter like he could see threats materializing in the darkness. Because we underestimated how deep the protection goes. Lucien's not just connected to powerful people, he owns them. Judges, federal agents, prosecutors, people we thought were untouchable. He turned back. We went after one man. We should have been going after a network. So what do? We disappear. Tonight. I have contacts in Montreal. Safe houses that aren't on any official record. We can be across the border before sunrise. Run? Celine's voice came out hollow. Strategically retreat. That's just running with better vocabulary. Caspian's jaw tightened. Celine, we're out of options. The evidence is destroyed. Our witnesses are dead or in hiding. Lucien has the full weight of a corrupted system protecting him. If we stay, we're dead inside a week. Then we rebuild the case. With what? The man who found the connections is ashes on the Kennedy Expressway. Then we find new connections. You're not listening. No, you're not listening. Celine's hands curled into fists. I spent 5 years being afraid. 5 years running from him inside my own head. I watched him get arrested. I watched him dragged away in handcuffs. And now you're telling me it was all for nothing? That he just walks away? I'm telling you that staying alive matters more than revenge. This isn't about revenge. Her voice rose. This is about 200 women who are still out there, still being sold, still being used. You think Lucien being in jail for 6 days shut down his entire operation? The clubs are still running, the trafficking is still happening, and if we run, he wins everything. If we stay, we die. Then we die fighting. Caspian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Celine moved closer. You told me you'd teach me to be dangerous, that you'd help me fight back. Was that a lie? Of course not. Then fight. Celine, fight. The word came out raw, desperate. Because if you won't, then everything you said about lines and rules and refusing to protect monsters was just performance, just words you used to make yourself feel better about a world you profit from. The accusation landed like a slap. Caspian's expression went cold. That's not fair. Fair? Celine laughed bitterly. Nothing about this is fair. Marcus dying isn't fair. Those women being trafficked isn't fair. Lucien walking free isn't fair. But we don't get to opt out just because the fight got harder. Silence filled the room. Rourke cleared his throat. Boss, we need to move. If Lucien's coming for us, he'll hit this location first. Give me a minute, Caspian said without looking away from Celine. Rourke hesitated, then gestured for the other security to step outside. When they were alone, Caspian spoke quietly. You think I don't want to fight? You think I don't want to put a bullet in Lucien's skull and watch the light go out of his eyes? His voice dropped to something dangerous. I've killed men for less than what he did to you. But this isn't about want. This is about strategy. And strategically, we're fucked. Then we adapt. To what? We have no evidence, no witnesses, no federal protection. Lucien has money, power, and the entire system in his pocket. What exactly are we supposed to adapt to? Celine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a certainty that hadn't been there before. We stop fighting his war. We start fighting ours. What does that mean? It means we stop trying to use the system against him. We stop playing by rules he's already rigged. She met his eyes. You said everyone in that ballroom was a criminal. That includes you. That includes me now. So we do this the way criminals do. No courts, no federal agents, just us, and everyone willing to stand with us. Caspian studied her face. You're talking about a war. We're already in one. I'm just suggesting we acknowledge it. People will die. People are already dying. Your father's families will come after us. Let them. Half the East Coast will want our heads. Then we'll stack their bodies so high Lucien can see them from whatever hole he's hiding in. Caspian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and swore. What now? Celine asked. Vincent Marcello is calling a meeting tomorrow night. Says it's urgent. The Philadelphia boss? Yeah. Why would he? Celine stopped. He stood with us at the summit. He did. So he's either going to help us or turn on us. Probably the latter. Caspian rubbed his face with both hands. Vincent doesn't do anything without an angle. If he's calling a meeting now, right after Lucien walks free, it's because he's calculated which side is more profitable. Then we convince him we're the better investment. How? Celine smiled, and for the first time since Caspian had known her, it looked genuinely dangerous. We give him what he wants most, which is territory, power, everything Lucien controls on the East Coast. She tilted her head. You said we're out of options. We're not. We're just out of clean options. Bussing. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Philadelphia, the kind of location that screamed ambush in every language. Caspian arrived with Rourke and 4 armed men who looked like they could walk through walls if necessary. Celine insisted on coming despite every protest Caspian had raised during the 6-hour drive. If this goes bad, he'd warned her in the car, I can't guarantee we'll walk out. Then we don't walk out. You're being reckless. I'm being committed. There's a difference. Now they stood in the sodium-lit warehouse surrounded by concrete and rust stains that might have been blood from previous negotiations. Vincent Marcello arrived 15 minutes later with twice as many men. The Philadelphia boss looked like he'd been carved from old leather and cigarette smoke. Scars crossed his face in patterns that told stories of survival. He walked with a slight limp from a bullet that had shattered his hip 3 years ago. Vale, Vincent said, not bothering with handshakes. Heard you had some trouble. Nothing I can't handle. That's not what I heard. I heard Lucian Thorne walked out of federal custody, and your whole case evaporated like morning fog. News travels fast. Bad news travels faster. Vincent lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs. So here's my question. Why shouldn't I just take Lucian's offer and hand you over right now? Caspian went very still. He made you an offer. 3 hours ago, said he'd split the East Coast territory 50-50 if I deliver you and your pretty wife in pieces. Celine stepped forward before Caspian could respond. And you came all the way here to tell us about it? That's either very stupid or very strategic. Vincent's eyes shifted to her. You got a mouth on you. I've got a lot more than that. Answer the question. Vincent took a long drag on his cigarette. I'm here because Lucian's offer sucks. 50-50 means I do the dirty work and he keeps the power. Plus, any man who traffics women the way he does, Vincent spat on the concrete. That's not business. That's just being a fucking monster. So you're with us? Caspian asked carefully. I didn't say that. Vincent pointed at them with the cigarette. I said Lucian's offer sucks. Yours might suck worse. What exactly are you proposing? We take Lucian apart, Celine said. Not through courts or federal agents, through old-fashioned war. We hit his operations, destroy his revenue streams, turn his own network against him until there's nothing left except him standing alone. And what do I get out of this suicide mission? Everything he controls in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Territory, operations, income streams, all of it. Vincent's eyebrows rose. That's a hell of an offer. It's a fair trade. You help us destroy him, you get his empire. And you? We get to watch him burn. Vincent studied her for a long moment. You really hate him that much? He tortured me for 5 years while my father watched and did nothing. Then he walked free after 6 days because the system he corrupted decided justice was inconvenient. Celine's voice stayed level, calm. So yes, I hate him that much. Fair enough. Vincent looked at Caspian. You letting your wife do all the talking now? She's better at it than I am. That's probably true. Vincent crushed the cigarette under his boot. All right, I'm in, but I want guarantees. Name them. First, I want proof Lucian's operations are as widespread as you claimed. I'm not starting a war based on rumors. We'll get you proof, Celine said. How? Your evidence got burned. We'll find new evidence. The operations still exist. The women are still being moved. We just have to follow the money again. That takes time. Then we move fast. Vincent grunted. Second guarantee. If this goes sideways and Lucian comes out on top, you don't drag me down with you. I get clean exit. No retaliation against my people. Agreed, Caspian said. Third, when we hit him, we hit everything at once. No half measures. I'm not getting in a prolonged war with the Thorne family unless we're committed to total destruction. That's the plan. Then we got a deal. Vincent extended his hand. Caspian shook it. The alliance formed in that grip lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. Flashbang grenades turned the space into chaos. Caspian hit the ground, dragging Celine with him as bullets chewed through the air where they'd been standing. Vincent's men returned fire. Rourke moved like a trained machine, laying down suppressive fire while screaming coordinates. Through the smoke and noise, Caspian saw them. 24 men in tactical gear, professional, coordinated, not random street soldiers. This was a hit, carefully planned, perfectly timed. Someone had known they would be here. Move! Caspian hauled Celine toward the back exit, staying low as concrete chips exploded around them. A bullet grazed his shoulder, hot pain spreading through the muscle, but he didn't stop. They reached the exit. The door was chained from outside. Fuck! Rourke snarled, already pulling bolt cutters from his vest. More gunfire. One of Vincent's men went down, screaming. The chains broke. The door flew open. They spilled out into the alley behind the warehouse, straight into more armed men. Caspian's gun was up and firing before conscious thought. 2 men dropped. Rourke took down 3 more. But there were too many. A rifle butt caught Caspian across the face. His vision whited out. He felt himself hit the ground, tasting blood and asphalt. Through the ringing in his ears, He heard Celine screaming. Then someone pressed a gun to the back of his skull. "Don't move." The voice was familiar. Caspian's blood turned into ice. Vincent Marcello stepped into his line of sight, gun raised but not firing. Behind him, Lucien Thorne emerged from an idling black car, smiling like death itself. "Did you really think," Lucien said conversationally, "that I didn't know about your little meeting? Vincent and I have been partners for 6 months. He called me the second you reached out." Vincent shrugged. "Nothing personal, Vale, just business." Caspian tried to speak. Blood filled his mouth. Lucien crouched down beside him. "I have to admit you surprised me. Getting federal agents involved, exposing my operations, making a genuine attempt to destroy me." He tilted his head. "But you forgot the most important rule of this world. Power isn't about who's right. It's about who can't be touched." "Fuck you," Caspian managed. "Oh, I'm not the one who's fucked." Lucien stood and walked toward where 2 men held Celine. She fought like a wild animal, but they were too strong. Lucien reached out and grabbed her jaw, forcing her to look at him. "Hello, darling. Did you miss me?" Celine spat in his face. Lucien's smile never wavered. He wiped the spit away with his thumb. Then he hit her. The backhand sent her crashing into the alley wall. Caspian roared and tried to rise. The gun barrel pressed harder against his skull. "Easy," the man holding the gun said. Lucien turned back to Caspian. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to watch what I do to her. Every scream, every bruise, every moment of pain. And when I'm finished, when there's nothing left of the woman you thought you could protect, I'm going to put a bullet in your brain." He smiled. "Then I'm going to go back to my life, my operations, my empire, and no one will remember your name." Caspian's vision blurred. From rage or blood loss, he couldn't tell. Lucien gestured to his men. "Load them both in the car. I have a special place prepared." They were dragged across concrete, thrown into a trunk. Darkness swallowed them. The last thing Caspian heard before unconsciousness took him was Celine's voice, raw and terrified. "Caspian." Then nothing. Braki, consciousness returned in fragments. Pain first. Everywhere. Ribs, shoulder, face. Then cold. Metal beneath him. The smell of old blood and chemicals. Caspian opened his eyes. He was chained to a support beam in what looked like a basement. Industrial. Probably a warehouse or factory. The kind of place where screams didn't carry. Across the room, Celine hung from chains attached to the ceiling, her toes barely touching the concrete. Blood ran from her split lip. Her dress was torn, but her eyes were open, and she was looking at him with something that wasn't fear. It was fury. "You're awake," Lucien's voice came from somewhere to the left. "Good. I was starting to worry you'd missed the show." He stepped into view, still impeccably dressed despite the violence, still smiling. "I've been thinking about this moment for days," Lucien continued, "planning it, savoring it. The great Caspian Vale brought low, the terrified little girl who thought she could destroy me, back where she belongs." "You're going to die screaming," Caspian rasped. "Am I?" Lucien laughed. "I don't think so. See, I learned something from our little confrontation. I learned that I've been too careful, too measured, hiding my work behind shell companies and corrupt officials." He pulled a knife from his jacket. "But why hide? I won the war. The system protects me. The families fear me. No one's coming to save you." He walked toward Celine. She didn't flinch. Lucien noticed, frowned. "Where's the fear? You used to shake when I entered a room. I'm done shaking." "We'll see about that." The knife moved toward her, and Celine laughed. The sound stopped Lucien cold. "Something funny?" he asked. "You," Celine said. "You're so proud of yourself, so convinced you won, but you're already dead. I'm standing here holding a knife to your throat. You're chained to a ceiling. Who exactly is dead?" "You are. You just don't know it yet." Lucien's smile faltered. "What are you—" The explosion came from upstairs, then another, then sustained gunfire. Lucien spun toward the stairs, confusion replacing confidence. The basement door flew open. Rourke descended like an avenging angel, gun in each hand, face splattered with blood that wasn't his. Behind him came Vincent Marcello and a dozen soldiers moving with military precision. Lucien raised his knife toward Celine. "One more step and I—" Vincent shot him in the shoulder. Lucian screamed and dropped the knife. Two men grabbed him before he could run. Rourke was already at Caspian's chains, cutting through them with bolt cutters. "Sorry, boss. Took longer than expected." Caspian stared at him. "What?" "Later. Right now. Let's get you both out of here." Vincent moved to lower Celine from her chains. She dropped into his arms, legs giving out from hanging for however long she'd been unconscious. "You're okay," Vincent said gruffly. "You're okay." Celine looked past him toward Lucian, now bleeding and surrounded. "Wait," she said. Everyone stopped. Celine walked forward on unsteady legs until she stood directly in front of Lucian Thorne. He looked at her with eyes full of rage and dawning terror. "You were right about one thing," Celine said quietly. "I used to shake when you entered a room. I used to pray you'd just kill me and end it." She leaned in close. "But I stopped praying, and I stopped shaking, and I started planning." Lucian's face went white. "The meeting wasn't a trap for us," Celine continued. "It was a trap for you. Vincent called you because we asked him to. We knew you'd bring your best soldiers. We knew you'd get confident, and we knew you'd bring us somewhere isolated where you could take your time." Understanding dawned on Lucian's face. "You used myself as bait." "Yeah." Celine smiled coldly. "Turns out 5 years of abuse taught me something useful. I know how predators think. I know what makes them feel powerful. And I know exactly how to make them overconfident enough to walk into a trap." She turned to Caspian. "You should probably explain the rest. I'm about to pass out." Caspian caught her as her legs finally gave out completely. He looked at Vincent over her head. "You sure you want in on this?" Vincent lit a cigarette. "Kid here convinced me. Said you needed someone Lucian would believe turned on you, someone he'd trust." He blew smoke toward Lucian. "Turns out I'm a pretty good actor." "The men outside?" "Mine. Real ones this time. Plus about 40 more surrounding this building. Lucien brought 24. We brought 60. Vincent grinned. "That's what happens when you stop fighting by rules and start fighting for real." Caspian looked at Celine, unconscious in his arms, blood on her face and chains marks on her wrists. Then he looked at Lucian. "You have a choice," Caspian said quietly. "We can kill you here. Quick. Painless. Over in seconds. Or," Lucian choked out, "or you give us everything, every name connected to your network, every location, every piece of evidence we need to destroy not just you, but everyone who protected you." Caspian's voice dropped to something inhuman. "And then we let you live. In a cell. Forever. Knowing that every single person you betrayed is coming for you." Lucian stared at him. "That's not a choice." "Sure it is. Choose." The silence stretched. Finally, Lucian's shoulders sagged. "I'll talk." "Smart man." Caspian handed Celine to Rourke. "Get her medical attention. Now." "What about you?" Caspian looked at Lucian with eyes that held no mercy. "I'm going to have a long conversation with our guest, and when I'm done, there won't be a single secret left to hide." As Rourke carried Celine toward the stairs, she stirred slightly and whispered something only Caspian heard. "Told you we'd win." Then darkness took her again. And in that basement that smelled like blood and old concrete, the war that started in a cathedral and escalated through federal arrests and shattered alliances finally shifted, not toward victory, toward something meaner. The kind of war where the only rule was survival and the only question that mattered was how far you were willing to go to protect what was yours. For Caspian and Celine, the answer was becoming clear, all the way. Lucien talked for 6 hours straight. Names spilled from his mouth like poison draining from a wound. Locations, bank accounts, shell corporations, federal agents on payroll, judges who took bribes, politicians who looked the other way. The entire network mapped out in excruciating detail by a man who understood his life ended the moment he started speaking. Caspian recorded every word. By dawn, they had enough evidence to destroy 100 careers and dismantle trafficking operations across 7 states. Vincent stood in the corner of the basement, smoking his 4th cigarette, watching Lucien's confession with the detached interest of someone observing an autopsy. "He's done," Vincent said finally. "Nothing left but the screaming." Caspian looked at Lucian. The man sat chained to a chair, blood dried on his shirt from the shoulder wound, eyes hollow with the understanding that he'd just signed death warrants for everyone he'd ever worked with, including himself. "What do you want to do with him?" Vincent asked. "Federal custody. Real custody this time. I have contacts in Washington who owe me favors. He'll be in a facility where judges can't reach him by morning." "You're letting him live?" "For now." Caspian's voice carried no warmth. "Death's too easy. I want him to spend years in a cell knowing every single person he betrayed is hunting him. Let him feel what he made Celine feel. Trapped. Helpless. Afraid." Vincent grunted approval. "Cold. I like it." "How is she?" Caspian asked. "Doc says she'll be fine. Bruised ribs, concussion, some stitches, nothing permanent." Vincent crushed his cigarette. "Mentally? That's going to take time. But that girl's tougher than steel wrapped in silk. She'll survive." Caspian felt something unclench in his chest. "I need to see her." "Go. We'll handle cleanup here." Caspian headed for the stairs, then paused. "Vincent, why'd you really help us?" Vincent was quiet for a moment. "You know I got 3 daughters?" "I didn't." "Yeah, 2 in college. One just turned 16. He looked at Lucian with open disgust. "I heard what he did. Not just to your wife, all of it. The trafficking, the clubs, girls younger than my youngest being sold to monsters." He shook his head. "I'm a criminal. I've done terrible things. But there's lines, and men who cross those lines don't deserve to breathe the same air as my daughters." Caspian nodded once. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This confession starts a war bigger than anything we've seen. When word gets out that Lucian gave up names, every dirty cop and corrupt politician is going to scramble. Some will run, some will fight back. It's going to get bloody." "Let it." Vincent smiled grimly. "Yeah, that's what I figured you'd say." Betrayal. Celine was awake when Caspian entered the medical room Vincent's people had set up in an adjacent building. She sat on an examination table, holding an ice pack to her ribs, her face pale but focused. A doctor was finishing stitches on her forearm, where one of Lucien's men had caught her with a knife during the struggle. She looked up when Caspian walked in. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Celine smiled slightly. "We won." "We survived," Caspian corrected. "Same thing. Not even close." The doctor finished the last stitch and stepped back. "You should rest. No strenuous activity for at least a week. The ribs especially." "I'm fine," Celine said. "You have a concussion." I said, "I'm fine." The doctor looked at Caspian for support. "She's stubborn," Caspian said. "You're not going to win this." The doctor sighed and left, muttering about patients with death wishes. When they were alone, Caspian crossed to stand beside the examination table. "You scared the hell out of me." "Good. Now you know how I felt watching you get pistol whipped." "That's not funny." "Wasn't trying to be funny." Celine set down the ice pack. "Did he talk?" "For 6 hours. Gave us everything." "Everything?" "Names, locations, financial records. Enough to destroy his entire network and everyone connected to it." Celine's eyes closed briefly. "How many?" "How many what? How many people are going down with him?" "Federal agents, 12. Judges, 8. Politicians, 6. Various businessmen and crime figures, at least 50. Caspian paused. "And your father?" Celine's jaw tightened, but she didn't look surprised. "He was part of it." "Financially, he took payments, provided protection through his political connections. He might not have known every detail, but he knew enough." "What happens now?" "We hand everything to the FBI, not the local field office. Washington. People high enough that corruption can't reach them." He studied her face. "Your father will be arrested, probably within 48 hours. His entire empire will collapse. Everything he built, gone." "Good." The word came out flat, final. Caspian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her hand gently. "Are you okay?" "No." She looked at him. "But I will be." "Celine, I used myself as bait. I let Lucian think he won. I walked into that basement knowing he'd hurt me before you arrived." Her voice stayed steady. "I made that choice. I knew the cost. And I'd do it again." "That doesn't mean you have to be okay with it. I'm not okay with any of this." I'm not okay with what he did to me. I'm not okay with what my father allowed. I'm not okay with 200 women being trafficked while people look the other way. She squeezed his hand. But I'm still here, still breathing, still fighting. That has to be enough. Before Caspian could respond, Rourke appeared in the doorway. Boss, we got a problem. What kind? The kind where 50 unmarked vehicles just surrounded this building and someone's demanding you come out with your hands up. Caspian's blood went cold. Who? Don't know yet. Could be feds, could be Alaric's people, could be whoever Lucian had on standby if shit went sideways. Rourke's hand rested on his weapon. Vincent's people are locked and loaded. If you want to fight our way out, we can try. But we're outnumbered 3-1, and they've got the high ground. Celine slid off the examination table, wincing as her ribs protested. I'm going with you. Like hell, Caspian said. They want both of us. You know they do. If you walk out alone, they'll just storm in here anyway. Then we fight. And how many people die? Yours, Vincent's, innocent people who just happened to be in the wrong place. She grabbed his arm. I didn't survive 5 years of torture and a kidnapping just to hide while you walk into an ambush alone. Caspian wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in a safe room and deal with whatever was outside himself. But he saw the determination in her eyes and knew he'd lost this fight before it started. Fine. But you stay behind me, and if I say run, you run. Deal. They moved through the building toward the front entrance. Vincent met them halfway, his face grim. It's feds, Vincent said. Real ones this time. Lead agent is identifying herself as Director Sarah Carmichael, FBI Organized Crime Division. Carmichael? Caspian frowned. I don't know that name. Neither do I. Which means she's either brand new or she's been working deep cover. Vincent checked his weapon. Either way, 50 Vehicles says they're not here to chat. They reached the main entrance. Through the reinforced glass doors, Caspian could see black SUVs arranged in precise formation, armed agents in tactical gear, helicopters circling overhead, a full federal response. In the center of it all stood a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back severely, wearing a bulletproof vest over a business suit. She held a megaphone. Caspian Vale, Celine Arden Vale, you have 60 seconds to exit the building with your hands visible or we're coming in. Shit, Rourke muttered. Caspian looked at Celine. Last chance to stay inside. Not happening. He opened the door. The morning air hit cold and sharp. Caspian walked out first, hands raised, Celine a half step behind. Vincent and Rourke stayed in the doorway, weapons lowered but ready. Director Carmichael lowered the megaphone as they approached. Up close, she looked like someone who'd spent 30 years dealing with humanity's worst impulses and stopped being surprised by any of it. Mr. Vale? Mrs. Vale. I'm Director Sarah Carmichael. We need to talk. About what? Caspian asked. About the fact that you're holding Lucian Thorne in a basement, have confessions to dozens of felonies recorded on your phone, and just orchestrated one of the largest evidence dumps in organized crime history. She tilted her head. Also about the small army you've assembled in violation of about 15 different federal laws. So you're here to arrest us? That depends. On what? On whether you're planning to hand over Lucian Thorne and all associated evidence without forcing me to explain to my superiors why I had to storm a building in Philadelphia that's currently occupied by 3 different crime families. Caspian studied her face. How do you know about the evidence? Because Agent Morrison worked for me before someone put a bullet in his head and staged it as suicide. Carmichael's voice went cold. He was deep cover, spent 2 years building a case against Lucian Thorne from the inside. When he arrested Thorne, he thought he'd won. Then someone with more power than sense made the arrest disappear. You're saying Morrison was your agent? I'm saying Morrison was one of the good ones. And when he died, I started digging into who killed him. She gestured at the surrounding vehicles. This is what I found. Corruption so deep it reaches federal judges, sitting congressmen, and at least 4 people in my own organization. So why come to us? Because you did in 6 days what my task force has been trying to do for 3 years. You exposed the network, got a full confession, built an airtight case. She paused. And you did it by breaking approximately 47 laws and putting yourself in the crosshairs of everyone Lucian Thorne ever protected. Celine spoke for the first time. What do you want? Carmichael looked at her. I want justice, real justice. Not the kind that gets negotiated away in backroom deals or buried under corrupt officials. I want every person connected to this trafficking network in prison, every victim rescued, every dirty cop exposed. She turned back to Caspian. And I want you to help me do it. Help you how? Testify. Both of you. Give us everything you have, names, evidence, recordings. In exchange, I'll provide witness protection and limited immunity for crimes committed during your investigation. Limited immunity doesn't sound very appealing. It's the best deal you're going to get. Without it, you're facing federal charges for kidnapping, conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, and about 30 other violations. Carmichael's expression softened slightly. But with it, you walk away. New identities, new lives, clean start. And Lucien? Life in prison, no possibility of parole. Federal supermax where he'll spend 23 hours a day in a concrete box. She smiled coldly. He'll wish you'd killed him. Caspian looked at Celine. She was already looking at him. No words passed between them. Didn't need to. They'd come too far, sacrificed too much, survived too many attempts on their lives to walk away without seeing it through to the end. We're in, Celine said, but we have conditions. Carmichael raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to negotiate. We have recordings of a full confession from one of the most connected traffickers on the East Coast. We have financial records that implicate dozens of federal officials. We have evidence that would make your career legendary. Celine stepped forward. So yes, we're absolutely in position to negotiate. A ghost of a smile crossed Carmichael's face. All right, what are your conditions? First, protection for every witness. Not just us. Every victim willing to testify. Full witness protection. New identities. Relocation expenses. Psychological support. Done. Second, you arrest everyone simultaneously. No warnings, no leaks. Every corrupt official, every client, every person connected to the network goes down at the same time. That'll take coordination. That's your problem. Carmichael's smile grew. What else? Third, Alaric Arden doesn't get a deal. No plea bargains, no reduced sentences. He goes down for everything he knew and everything he allowed. Carmichael's eyes sharpened. He's your father. He stopped being my father when he handed me to a monster and took money to look the other way. Celine's voice didn't waver. I want him to lose everything, just like he made me lose everything. That's cold. He earned it. Carmichael was quiet for a moment. Anything else? Yeah, Caspian said. After we testify, after the trials, after everyone's convicted and sentenced. He looked at Director Carmichael with absolute seriousness. You forget we exist. No follow-up investigations, no monitoring, no agents checking in every 6 months. We disappear completely. That's asking for a lot of trust. You want our evidence? That's the price. Carmichael studied them both. Calculation flickered behind her eyes as she weighed the political cost against the potential victory. Finally, she extended her hand. Deal. They shook. There's one more thing, Carmichael said. The arrests start in 72 hours. Coordinated raids across 7 states. Every person Lucien named goes down simultaneously. She paused. But Alaric Arden is smart. The second he hears about Lucien's arrest, he'll run. We need him contained until we're ready to move. What are you suggesting? Caspian asked. I'm suggesting you call him. Tell him you need to meet. Somewhere public. Somewhere we can monitor. Carmichael's eyes were hard. And you keep him there until my people arrive. Celine laughed once. Sharp, bitter. You want me to have dinner with my father while federal agents surround the building? Yes. And if he suspects something, if he figures out it's a trap and runs, then we lose one of the biggest fish in this entire operation. And if he tries to hurt me, he won't get the chance. We'll have sniper coverage, undercover agents inside. The second he makes a move, we intervene. Celine looked at Caspian. What do you think? I think it's dangerous. I think your father's unpredictable. And I think if anything goes wrong, you're in the line of fire. So a normal Tuesday. Despite everything, Caspian almost smiled. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Celine turned back to Carmichael. I'll make the call. But Caspian comes with me. And if my father so much as looks at me wrong, I want permission to put him on the ground myself. Noted. Carmichael pulled out a phone. Make the call now. Tell him you need to see him. Family emergency. Tonight at 7. Vincenzo's in downtown Chicago. That's a 5-star restaurant with excellent security and clear sight lines from every angle. Plus, it's public enough that your father won't suspect a trap. She handed over the phone. Clock's ticking. Celine took the phone. Her hands didn't shake. She dialed. The call lasted 3 minutes. Alaric's voice came through suspicious at first, then calculating, then falsely warm when Celine mentioned wanting to repair their relationship. Of course, darling. 7 o'clock. I'll make a reservation. When she hung up, Celine handed the phone back to Carmichael. He's coming. Good. My people will be in position by 6. You and Mr. Vale arrive at 7 sharp. Order dinner. Keep him talking. We'll handle the rest. What if he brings security? Let him. We'll have 50 agents in a 3-block radius. He could bring an army, and it wouldn't matter. Caspian's jaw tightened. This feels wrong. It's a trap, Carmichael said. It's supposed to feel wrong, but it's the cleanest way to ensure he doesn't run. And after? After you arrest him and everyone else? After you testify at trial. Help us put these monsters away. Then you disappear. She met his eyes. You have my word. You cooperate fully, and when it's over, the FBI forgets you exist. Caspian wanted to believe her, but he'd learned long ago that promises meant nothing when power was involved. Still, they were out of options. Fine, he said. We'll be there at 7. Die Ausspunkt. The hours between the deal and dinner crawled past like wounded animals. Caspian and Celine were taken to a federal safe house in downtown Chicago. Armed agents guarded every entrance. Surveillance cameras covered every angle. It felt less like protection and more like house arrest. Celine spent most of the afternoon pacing. You should rest, Caspian said from where he sat reviewing the files Marcus had compiled before he died. Can't. You have a concussion. I'm aware. Celine, I'm about to sit across from the man who sold me to a monster. She stopped pacing to look at him. I'm about to look him in the eyes and pretend I want reconciliation while federal agents wait to drag him away in handcuffs. You really think I can rest? No, Caspian admitted, but I can hope you'll try. She crossed to where he sat and took the files from his hands. Tell me the truth. Do you think this works? The arrest? All of it. The trials. The convictions. Justice. She said the last word like it tasted foreign. Do you actually believe we win? Caspian pulled her down to sit beside him. I think we've already won. We survived. We exposed the network. We got a full confession. Everything else is just paperwork. That's not what I asked. He sighed. You want the truth? I don't know. I've seen powerful men walk away from worse. I've watched evidence disappear and witnesses recant. This world we operate in, justice is optional, negotiable, something that happens to other people. Then why are we doing this? Because maybe, just maybe, we can be the exception. He turned to face her fully. Because 200 women deserve more than being forgotten. Because monsters like Lucien need to understand there are still consequences. And because you, his voice softened, because you deserve to look your father in the eyes and watch him realize he lost. Celine was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. Not gentle this time, desperate, fierce, the kind of kiss that tasted like goodbye and beginning all at once. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Celine whispered, Promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong tonight, if my father figures it out and everything falls apart. She held his gaze. Promise me you'll run. You'll save yourself even if I can't be saved. Celine, promise me. No. Caspian, I said no. His hands came up to frame her face. I didn't pull you out of hell just to abandon you when things get hard. We started this together. We finish it together, no matter what. Tears welled in her eyes. You're an idiot. Probably. This is going to get us both killed. Maybe. And you're okay with that? Caspian smiled. As long as we take them down with us. Moch. Vincenzo's was the kind of restaurant where reservations were made 3 months in advance and the cheapest wine cost more than rent. Caspian and Celine arrived at 6:58, dressed like they belonged in a world of crystal chandeliers and $20 appetizers. Celine wore a black dress. Simple, elegant, the kind of armor that looked like fashion. Caspian wore a suit that concealed his weapon better than it concealed his tension. They were shown to a private table near the back. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River. Other diners murmured in low voices about business deals and stock portfolios. None of them knew they were eating dinner inside a federal operation. Alaric Arden arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. He looked older than Caspian remembered. Gray had crept into his temples. Lines bracketed his mouth that hadn't been there at the wedding, but his eyes still held that calculating coldness that marked him as a survivor in a world built on violence. "Celine." He smiled as he approached. "You look beautiful." "Father." Her voice stayed neutral. Alaric's gaze shifted to Caspian. "Vale, I'm surprised you agreed to this meeting." "Celine wanted to see you," Caspian said flatly. "I go where she goes." "How romantic." Alaric sat down across from them. "Though I have to admit I'm curious why now. Why reach out after everything that's happened?" "Maybe I'm tired of being angry," Celine said carefully. "Maybe I want to understand why you did what you did." Alaric's smile didn't reach his eyes. "What exactly did I do?" "You know what you did. Enlighten me." The waiter appeared before Celine could respond. Orders were taken. Wine poured. The ritual of expensive dining played out like theater over a minefield. When they were alone again, Alaric leaned back in his chair. "I'll admit, when you called, I was skeptical. You've made it very clear you blame me for, well, everything." He sipped his wine. "But then I thought perhaps my daughter is finally growing up, finally understanding how the world really works." "And how does the world work, Father?" "Through compromise, through sacrifice, through understanding that sometimes people get hurt so others can thrive." He set down the glass. "What happened to you with Lucienne? I didn't enjoy it, but it was necessary." Caspian's hand clenched under the table. Celine's expression never changed. "Necessary for what? For the alliance. For peace between our families. For maintaining power in a world that rewards strength and punishes weakness." Alaric leaned forward. "You were always going to marry someone, Celine. At least with Lucienne, the match benefited everyone." "Everyone except me." "You survived, didn't you? You're sitting here, breathing, married to a man who actually seems to care about you." He waved a hand dismissively. "So a few years were unpleasant, but now you're stronger for it. That's the price of being born into this life." Celine took a careful sip of water. Under the table, her other hand found Caspian's and squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "Did you know what he was doing? The trafficking, the clubs, the women?" Alaric's expression flickered just for a moment. "I knew Lucien had business ventures. That's not what I asked. I knew he operated in morally gray areas, as do we all." "Did you?" "No." Each word came out precise as a knife cut. Alaric's eyes hardened. "Yes." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a gun. "And you took money from those operations," Celine continued. "Consulting fees, perfectly legal. Blood money from selling women." "Celine, did you ever wonder where those women ended up? Did you think about the girls younger than me being sold to men who—" Her voice cracked. She stopped, breathed, continued. "Did you ever think about me at all? Or was I just another transaction?" Alaric's jaw tightened. "You're being emotional." "I'm being honest." "Then here's some honesty for you." He leaned forward. "Yes, I knew what Lucien was doing. Yes, I took money from his operations. And yes, I allowed him to discipline you because I needed the alliance more than I needed you happy." His voice went cold. "That's the world we live in. That's the choice I made. And I'd make it again." Celine's face went pale. Caspian started to rise. Then the windows exploded inward. Glass. Screaming. Federal agents in tactical gear pouring through every entrance. But the agents weren't moving toward Alaric. They were returning fire at shooters outside. Someone had attacked the federal operation. Alaric dove under the table as bullets chewed through walls and shattered crystal. Civilians screamed and scrambled for exits. Caspian threw himself over Celine, shielding her with his body as the world dissolved into chaos. Through the smoke and gunfire, he caught glimpses of the attackers. 24 men. Professional. Coordinated. Wearing body armor marked with a symbol he recognized. The Thorne family crest. Lucian's people had found them, and they'd just turned a controlled federal operation into a war zone. Someone grabbed Caspian's shoulder. He spun, weapon drawn. Vincent Marcello. "Move!" Vincent shouted over the gunfire. "Back exit! Now!" "What about Carmichael?" "Carmichael's pinned down. They hit the command post first. This whole thing's fucked. We need to get you out." Caspian looked down at Celine. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead where flying glass had caught her, but her eyes were clear. "Go," she said. They ran, through the kitchen, past terrified staff, out a service entrance into an alley where 3 SUVs waited. Rourke was in the driver's seat of the first one, engine already running. "Get in!" They piled in. Tires screamed. The SUV launched forward through narrow Chicago streets as sirens wailed in the distance. Celine looked back through the rear window at the restaurant. Smoke poured from shattered windows. Federal agents and Thorne family soldiers exchanged fire in the street. And somewhere in that chaos, her father was either dead or on the run. She turned to face forward. Caspian was already on the phone with Carmichael. "What the hell just happened?" Carmichael's voice came through tight with rage. "Someone leaked the operation. Thorne's people knew exactly where to hit and when." "How many casualties?" "Still counting, but Vale. This changes everything. Someone in my organization is dirty. Someone high enough to know about this operation." She paused. "You need to disappear, right now. Don't go back to any location we discussed. Don't trust anyone connected to this case. Just vanish." "What about the arrests?" "Still happening, but accelerated. We move tonight on everyone we can grab before word spreads." Carmichael's voice hardened. "But you and your wife? You're blown. Every family connected to Lucien now knows you cooperated. Every dirty official knows you're witnesses. You have maybe 12 hours before the entire underworld comes for you." The call ended. Celine looked at Caspian. 12 hours. Yeah, that's not a lot of time. No. What do we do? Caspian met her eyes. In them he saw exhaustion, pain, fear, but also something else. Determination. The same fire that had burned in her when she used herself as bait to trap Lucien. The same steel that let her sit across from her father and listen to him admit he'd sold her without flinching. "We finish this," Caspian said. "Tonight. We don't run. We don't hide. We take the fight to them before they can organize against us." "That's suicide." "Probably." Celine smiled, tired, fierce. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." Rourke glanced in the rearview mirror. "Boss, if we're doing this, we need a plan. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and the entire East Coast crime network is about to declare open season on your heads." "Then we hit them before they hit us," Caspian said. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. "Vincent, I need everyone you can spare. Every soldier, every gun, every favor you're owed." He paused. "We're going after the Thorne family. Tonight. All of them." Vincent's laugh came through the phone. "You really are insane. Are you in or out?" "What the hell? I've lived long enough." Vincent's voice turned serious. "I'll have 40 men ready in 2 hours. Where?" Caspian looked at Celine. She nodded once. "The Thorne estate. Long Island. We burn it to the ground." He made 6 more calls. Old alliances. Blood debts. Promises owed. By the time the SUV reached the private airfield where Vincent kept a plane, Caspian had assembled a small army. Not enough to win a war, but enough to make one hell of a statement. The plane lifted off as midnight approached. Below, Chicago disappeared into darkness. Ahead, New York waited. And somewhere in the sprawling Thorne estate on Long Island, Lucien Yin's family was about to learn what happened when you backed wounded animals into corners. They fought back, with everything they had left. Celine stared out the plane window at clouds illuminated by moonlight. Her reflection stared back, pale and determined. Beside her, Caspian checked weapons and coordinated with the assault teams via encrypted radio. Across the aisle, Vincent and Rourke reviewed building schematics of the Thorne estate, marking entry points and defensive positions. 40 soldiers sat in grim silence, each one understanding that the odds of surviving the next 12 hours hovered somewhere between unlikely and impossible. But they came anyway, because some fights were worth dying for. The plane cut through darkness toward Long Island, toward the final battle, toward an ending written in blood and fire. And in the pregnant silence before violence erupted, Celine whispered one last thing. Let them come. Let them all come. I'm done being afraid. Caspian took her hand. Then let's show them what happens when victims become predators. The plane descended through clouds toward New York, toward war, toward whatever ending waited on the other side of midnight. One way or another, by sunrise, this would be finished. The Thorne estate sprawled across 15 acres of Long Island coastline, like a monument to blood money and old power. Stone walls, iron gates, security cameras covering every angle, 30 private guards patrolling grounds designed to repel armies. Caspian's assault team hit it at 2 a.m. with 40 soldiers, 3 entry points, and absolutely nothing to lose. The first explosion took out the main gate. The second killed the power grid. Then Vincent's people poured through the breach like a flood breaking a dam, and the night dissolved into gunfire and chaos. Caspian moved through smoke and darkness with Celine beside him, and Rourke covering their flank. They'd gone over the schematics 100 times on the plane. Master bedroom, second floor, east wing. That's where Malcolm Thorne would be. Lucien's father. The patriarch who'd built an empire on trafficking and corruption. The man who'd raised a monster and protected him for decades. Bullets chewed through marble columns. Men screamed. Flashbangs turned the world white. They fought their way up a grand staircase littered with bodies. Some wearing Thorne family colors. Some wearing Vincent's. War didn't distinguish between uniforms when everyone bled the same. The second-floor hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel, built from wealth and violence. Oil paintings, Persian rugs, all of it illuminated by muzzle flashes and emergency lighting. Rourke kicked open the master bedroom door. Malcolm Thorne sat in a leather chair facing the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching his estate burn. He didn't turn around when they entered. I wondered when you'd come, Malcolm said quietly. His voice carried the weight of 70 years spent building kingdoms on suffering. Though I expected subtlety. This is rather dramatic. Where's Lucien? Caspian demanded. Federal custody. Where you put him. Malcolm took a sip. Quite clever, really. Getting him to confess. Destroying his credibility. Turning his own words into weapons. Then you know why we're here. Oh, I know exactly why you're here. Malcolm finally turned. He looked nothing like his son. Where Lucien carried cruelty wrapped in charm, Malcolm just looked tired. You're here because you think destroying me destroys the network. You think if you burn down this house and kill everyone inside, the trafficking stops. The corruption ends. Justice prevails. Something like that. Malcolm laughed once, bitter. You really don't understand how this works, do you? Enlighten me. I'm not the network. I'm just a node in something far larger. Kill me and 3 others step up to fill the gap. Burn this estate, and the clubs keep operating. Arrest everyone Lucien named, and the clients find new suppliers. He set down the glass. You're fighting a hydra. Cut off 1 head, 2 more grow back. Then we'll keep cutting, Celine said. Malcolm's gaze shifted to her. Recognition flickered. Ah, the bride who survived. I heard about you. Heard what my son did. He shook his head. For what it's worth, I didn't approve. Lucien always took things too far, too personal. Business should never be personal. How considerate. I mean it. What he did to you was excessive, unnecessary. It drew attention we didn't need and created enemies we didn't want. Malcolm stood slowly. If he'd just married you properly, treated you with baseline decency, none of this would have happened. You'd have lived a comfortable life, born children, played your role. And the 200 other women? Malcolm shrugged. Collateral damage in a system that's existed for centuries. I didn't invent it, I just profited from it. Celine's hand drifted toward her weapon. Caspian put a hand on her arm. Don't, he said quietly. Not yet. Why not? Because I want him to see it coming. Malcolm smiled without humor. You think killing me accomplishes something? The FBI already has my name from Lucien's confession. I was going to be arrested in... He checked his watch. 3 hours. Federal agents coordinating raids across 7 states. Very thorough. Very inconvenient. So you were planning to run. I was planning to disappear. Switzerland has excellent banking privacy laws and no extradition treaty for my particular crimes. He gestured at the window where smoke rose from burning out buildings. But you've rather complicated that plan. Good. Is it? Malcolm crossed to a cabinet and pulled out papers. Passports. Bank account information. Because now instead of disappearing quietly, I'm going to die here. And my death changes nothing. The network continues. The clients find new suppliers. Women keep being trafficked. He tossed the papers into the fireplace, where they caught and burned. So what exactly have you won? The question hung in smoke-filled air. Downstairs, gunfire continued, men shouting, glass breaking. We've won you, Caspian said finally, and everyone like you who thought they were untouchable. For how long? A generation? 2? Malcolm's smile was cold. This world runs on exploitation. Always has. Always will. You can't stop it. You can only choose whether to profit from it or pretend you're above it. Or we can choose to fight it, Celine said. Every day, every person we save, every monster we expose. Maybe we can't destroy the system, but we can make it harder, costlier, more dangerous. She stepped closer. And we can make sure men like you and your son understand there are still consequences. Malcolm studied her face. You've changed. When Lucienne first brought you to family dinners, you barely spoke. Just sat there, terrified, trying not to exist. He tilted his head. Now look at you, standing in my bedroom with a gun, ready to kill me. That's character development. That's survival. Same thing in this world. Celine raised her weapon. Malcolm didn't flinch. Go ahead, pull the trigger. Make yourself a murderer. See if that weight sits easier than victimhood. Her finger tightened on the trigger. 1 breath. 2. Then she lowered the gun. No. Malcolm's eyebrows rose. Mercy? Efficiency. Celine looked at Caspian. Federal agents are coming in 3 hours. Let them have him. Let him spend the rest of his life in a cell knowing he lost everything. His money, his power, his legacy. That's worse than a bullet. Malcolm's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Fear. Smart girl, he said quietly. I learned from watching monsters. Rourke zip-tied Malcolm's hands behind his back and shoved him toward the door. Let's move. Building's not secure and we're running out of time. They descended through chaos. The main floor was littered with bodies and broken furniture. Vincent's people had pushed Thorne's security to the perimeter, but resistance remained fierce. Outside, the estate grounds looked like a war zone. Burning vehicles, wounded men being dragged to cover, medics working frantically in the shadows. Vincent appeared through the smoke, blood streaking his face from a cut above his eye. We got about 15 minutes before local cops arrive. We need to move. Malcolm Thorne, Caspian said, gesturing at their prisoner. Federal target, worth more alive than dead. Vincent looked at Malcolm with open disgust. You sure? Be easier to just... I'm sure. Your call. Vincent turned to his lieutenant. Load him in the transport. Keep him breathing until the feds show up. As Malcolm was dragged away, he looked back at Celine one last time. My son destroyed you for 5 years. What makes you think you won't become exactly like him? Because, Celine said quietly, I chose to stop the cycle instead of continuing it. Malcolm was gone before he could respond. The assault team retreated in stages, vehicles racing away from the estate as sirens wailed in the distance. By the time local police arrived, only bodies and smoke remained. The plane lifted off from a private airfield at 3:30 in the morning. Below, Long Island receded into darkness. Inside the cabin, exhausted soldiers treated wounds and tried not to think about the men they'd lost. Caspian sat beside Celine, both of them covered in soot and someone else's blood. How many? Celine asked quietly. How many what? How many of Vincent's people didn't make it out? Rourke, sitting across the aisle, answered. 8 dead, 14 wounded. Could have been worse. That doesn't make it better. No, Rourke agreed. It doesn't. Celine stared at her hands. They didn't shake anymore. Hadn't shaken since the basement where Lucien tried to break her one final time. She wondered if that was growth or just numbness. Caspian's phone buzzed. He checked the message and swore softly. What? Celine asked. Carmichael. The raids happened simultaneously across 7 states. 83 arrests, including... He paused. Including your father. Celine's breath caught. Where? O'Hare Airport. He was trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands using a fake passport. Caspian showed her the photo. Alaric Arden in handcuffs, flanked by federal agents, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. He's going away for a long time. She stared at the photo. Her father. The man who'd raised her, protected her as a child, then sold her to a monster when it became politically convenient. She felt nothing, not satisfaction, not grief, just a vast emptiness where complicated feelings used to live. Good, she said finally. Caspian put the phone away. Carmichael says trials start in 6 months. She'll need us to testify. Then we testify. After that, witness protection, new identities, new lives. Where? Anywhere we want. She suggested Montana, Oregon, somewhere remote where the past can't find us. Celine looked at him. You'd give up Chicago, your empire, everything you built? I'd give up anything to keep you safe. That's not an answer. Caspian was quiet for a long moment. Chicago was never really mine. It was just a place I controlled because I was meaner and smarter than everyone else. But control isn't the same as belonging. He turned to face her fully. You asked me once why I was doing this, why I cared about your situation when we were just a business arrangement. I remember. The truth? I spent 15 years building an empire on violence. I told myself it was strategy, survival, the cost of power. But watching what Lucien did to you, seeing the network we exposed, his voice caught. I realized I'd been lying to myself. I wasn't just profiting from the same system, I was protecting it by existing within it. So this was redemption? This was choosing to be something other than the monster I was becoming. Celine reached out and took his hand. You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things. So have I now. That's different. It's not. Her grip tightened. We both made choices. We both have blood on our hands. The only difference is whether we let those choices define us or whether we use them to become something better. And what are we becoming? I don't know yet. She leaned her head against his shoulder. But we'll figure it out together. The plane flew through darkness toward an uncertain dawn. 6 months later, the trials began. Federal courthouse, downtown Chicago. Security so tight, the pigeons needed clearance to land on the roof. Celine testified for 3 days straight. She told everything, the abuse, the torture, the 5 years of hell disguised as discipline. Every detail laid bare in a courtroom packed with journalists, prosecutors, and family members of victims. Lucien sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, watching her with eyes that promised violence if he ever got free. He never did. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Life in prison, federal supermax, 23 hours a day in a concrete box with no possibility of parole. Celine watched the verdict read and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the slow exhale after holding your breath for years. Alaric's trial followed 2 weeks later. He fought harder. Better lawyers. Character witnesses. Attempts to discredit Celine's testimony by painting her as a vengeful daughter with an axe to grind. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records. Recorded phone calls. Testimony from dozens of witnesses who'd watched him take money and provide protection for a trafficking network. 20 years. Federal prison. Loss of all assets. The East Coast dynasty he'd spent his life building collapsed in a single afternoon. When Celine left the courthouse that day, reporters swarmed like locusts, cameras flashing, questions shouted, everyone wanting a piece of the woman who'd brought down one of the most powerful crime families in the country. Caspian's security team held them back while Celine walked through the chaos toward a waiting car. She didn't look back, didn't give them the satisfaction of a response, just got in the car and let the door close on a chapter of her life that had nearly killed her. Montana turned out to be exactly what the name suggested. Mountains, sky, distance between you and everything else measured in miles instead of blocks. The cabin sat on 40 acres of forest and meadow with the nearest neighbor 3 miles away. No cell service, no internet, just wood smoke and silence and the kind of peace that felt almost aggressive after years of violence. Caspian and Celine arrived on a late autumn afternoon when the aspens had turned gold and the air tasted like snow. New names, new identities, new lives built from the ashes of everything they'd burned down. The first few weeks were strange. Celine would wake at 3 in the morning, heart racing, convinced she heard footsteps outside. Caspian would reach for weapons that weren't there anymore, instinct overriding the reality that they weren't soldiers anymore. Just two people trying to remember how to be human. They learned slowly. Celine started painting. Abstract pieces at first, then landscapes. The mountains, the sky, colors she'd forgotten existed during years spent surviving in gray. Caspian learned carpentry. Built furniture with his hands instead of empires with violence. Every chair, every table, solid and functional, and made from something other than fear. Some days were easier than others. Some nights, Celine still woke screaming from nightmares where Lucian's hands found her again. Caspian would hold her until the panic passed, whispering reminders that Lucien was in a box and she was free and the monsters couldn't reach her anymore. Other nights, Caspian woke choking on memories of men he'd killed, wondering if redemption was even possible for someone with his history. Celine would stay awake with him, talking about nothing until dawn, reminding him that becoming better didn't erase the past, but it did give the future different options. Winter arrived with 10 feet of snow and temperatures cold enough to crack stone. They survived it together. Spring came slowly, melting the world back into color. One morning, almost a year after the trials ended, Celine woke before dawn and walked outside to watch the sunrise. The valley spread below the cabin in shades of green and gold. Elk grazed in the meadow. Birds sang their territorial claims. Everything felt impossibly alive. Caspian found her there, wrapped in a blanket, watching light spill across mountains. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." "Nightmares?" "No." She turned to look at him. "I was thinking." About? About how different everything is now. A year ago, I was testifying in federal court. 2 years ago, I was being tortured. 3 years ago, I'd convinced myself this was just life, that fear was normal. She paused. Now I'm standing on a mountain in Montana watching elk and thinking about whether we should plant a garden. Caspian smiled. "That's quite a trajectory." "Is this real?" she asked quietly. "This peace? This life? Or are we just hiding from a world that's going to come for us eventually? Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I need to know if I'm healing or just running." Caspian moved to stand beside her. "Director Carmichael calls once a month. Updates on the cases. The trafficking network we exposed? It's still being dismantled. 53 more arrests in the past year. 17 clubs shut down permanently. Over 300 women recovered and placed in safe housing." "I know. And the Phoenix Haven Foundation that we funded before everything went sideways? It's still operating. Expanded to 4 more states. Saved God knows how many lives." He looked at her. "So maybe we're hiding. Maybe we're healing. Maybe we're both. But the work continues even when we're not the ones doing it." Celine considered that. "You think we made a difference?" "I think we made the difference we could make. Changed the things we could change. Saved the people we could save." He paused. "The rest? That's someone else's fight now." "And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with waking up next to you without worrying someone's coming to kill us. I'm okay with building furniture instead of criminal enterprises. I'm okay with—" He stopped. Started again. "I'm okay with being boring, with being nobody, with just existing instead of always fighting." Celine reached for his hand. "You're not nobody. I'm not Caspian Vale anymore. That person died when we got on the plane to Montana." "Then who are you?" "I don't know yet." He smiled. "But I'm figuring it out with you. That seems like enough." They stood together watching sunrise paint the world in colors that had nothing to do with violence. After a long silence, Celine spoke again. "I want to do something." "What?" "I want to reach out to some of the women, the ones who testified, the ones we helped rescue. Not as Celine Arden, that person's gone, but as someone who survived the same thing they did." She looked at him. "I want to help build support networks, trauma counseling, resources for women trying to rebuild after trafficking." Her voice strengthened. "I can't fight the whole system, but I can help people survive it." Caspian studied her face. The woman who once whispered, "Please don't touch me," was gone. So was the terrified bride who flinched at loud noises. What stood beside him now was someone who'd walked through hell and chosen to use the experience to light the way for others. "I think," he said quietly, "that's exactly what you should do. You'll help? However I can." She smiled then. Not the polite smile she'd worn through years of abuse, not the cold smile she'd given Malcolm Thorne before letting federal agents take him. A real smile, genuine, the kind that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not saving me." Caspian frowned. "I don't understand. You didn't save me. You gave me the tools and safety to save myself. You taught me to fight, to be dangerous, to stop being afraid." She turned to face him fully. "If you just rescued me, I would have stayed a victim forever. But you let me become something else, someone who could rescue herself. You did that on your own." "No, we did that together." She reached up and touched his face. "You're not the monster you think you are, and I'm not the broken thing Lucien tried to create. We're just two people who survived terrible things and chose to become better instead of bitter." Caspian pulled her close. She fit against him perfectly, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her like she was something precious he'd spent his whole life searching for. Below them, the valley woke slowly, life continuing in all its messy, complicated beauty. And standing on that mountain, watching light chase away darkness, they understood something fundamental. Victory wasn't about destroying every enemy, wasn't about perfect justice or complete redemption. Victory was surviving with your humanity intact, was choosing to heal instead of fester, was building something good from the wreckage of everything bad. Ikek. 3 years after the trials, director Sarah Carmichael made her annual visit to Montana. She brought photographs, updates, news from a world they'd left behind. "Lucien Thorne died last month," Carmichael said, sitting at their kitchen table with coffee. "Prison justice. They found him in his cell. Someone had carved predator into his chest." Celine set down her mug carefully. "How do you feel about that?" "I feel like I should care more about due process, but mostly I'm just tired." Carmichael pulled out more photos. "These are the women, the ones you helped save. I thought you'd want to see them." Faces stared up from photographs. Women smiling, some with children, some in graduation gowns, some just existing, which was enough. "Elena Rodriguez," Carmichael said, pointing to one photo. "Remember her? 12 years old when Lucien threatened to kill her if Celine talked. She's 16 now, straight-A student, wants to be a lawyer." Celine's eyes welled up. "And this is Maya Chen. She was trafficked for 2 years before your case broke everything open. Now she runs a support group for survivors in Seattle." Carmichael smiled. "She asked me to tell you something if I ever saw you. She said, 'Thank the bride for being braver than any of us.'" "I wasn't brave," Celine whispered. "I was just tired of being afraid." Same thing sometimes. Carmichael spent 2 hours updating them on cases, convictions, and continued investigations. The network they'd exposed was still being dismantled piece by piece. When she finally left, she paused at the door. "You know you can come back, right? Resume your lives. The threats are mostly gone. Lucien's dead, his family's scattered. The families you exposed are either in prison or too busy surviving to come after you." "We know," Caspian said, "but you're staying anyway." "We are." Carmichael looked between them. "You found something here." "Peace," Celine said simply. "And that's enough?" "It's everything." Carmichael nodded slowly. "Then I'm happy for you, truly." She extended her hand. "If you ever need anything, you know how to reach me." They shook. When her car disappeared down the long driveway, Celine turned to Caspian. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The power, the control, being someone people feared." "No." "Not even a little?" "Not even a little." He pulled her close. "I'd rather be nobody with you than king of a broken world alone." That evening, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire and gold. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. The wind carried the smell of pine and distance. And in the comfortable silence between two people who'd survived impossible things together, Celine spoke one last truth. "Your father didn't save me, sweetheart. He gave me the strength and safety to save myself." Caspian looked at her, confused. "What?" Celine smiled and placed a hand on her stomach where the smallest swell of life had started to show. Practicing, she said softly, for when she asks about the scars someday. Caspian's breath caught. She or he? Too early to tell. Celine's eyes filled with tears. But either way, they'll be born into a world we fought to make safer. A world where monsters face consequences and victims become survivors, and sometimes, her voice broke. Sometimes broken people get to heal. Caspian knelt in front of her, his hands covering hers on her stomach where their future grew. Are you sure? He asked. The doctor confirmed it last week. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to be sure first. Wanted to know if I could do this, raise a child, be a mother. After everything, she stopped, started again. I wasn't sure I had anything good left to give. And now? Now I know I have everything to give. Not perfection, not a life without scars, but love, safety, the kind of strength that comes from surviving hell and choosing to become human again. She met his eyes. Our child will know they're wanted, protected, worth fighting for. That has to be enough. It's more than enough, Caspian whispered. It's everything. They sat together on that porch as darkness fell and stars emerged overhead. In the distance, wolves howled their ancient songs. Closer, the cabin glowed with warmth and the promise of lives being lived instead of merely survived. And somewhere in the vast Montana wilderness, far from courtrooms and crime families and the violence that had nearly destroyed them both, two people who'd been broken by the world began building something new. Not an empire, not a dynasty, just a family. Simple, imperfect, beautiful. The strongest thing they'd ever created from the ashes of everything that tried to burn them down. Years later, when their daughter asked about the faint scars on her mother's shoulders, Celine would smile and tell the truth. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive. That monsters are real, but so are the people who fight them. That being afraid doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And that the strongest love isn't the kind that never breaks. It's the kind that breaks and heals and keeps choosing to exist anyway. Their story had started with a whispered plea in the darkness. Please don't touch me. It ended with a child sleeping peacefully between parents who'd learned that touch could mean safety instead of pain, that love could heal instead of harm, and that sometimes the most powerful act of defiance against a broken world was simply choosing to keep living in it, not as victims, not as monsters, just as people who survived and refused to let survival be the end of their story. The rest was just details. The important part was already written in every breath, every sunrise, every moment they chose to keep building instead of burning. And that was enough.